Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to remind you that I created an original role-playing game called Burn Bright. That's B-R-Y-T-E for Bright. Burn Bright is an original science fantasy role-playing game that was built from the ground up for Roll20. It is a game that challenges players to hope in the face of hopelessness. It is about telling stories where characters rise above all odds. You get to play some awesome, super-powered, weird alien species, and it uses some really unique mechanics. Plus, we're all transitioning our games to online these days, so you are going to want to check it out because it's powered by, optimized for, and published by Roll20. Go check it out at burnbright.com. That's burnbright, B-R-Y-T-E.com. All right, let's jump into this episode. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, we are talking with V Muse, the Crafting Muse herself, who is going to tell us all about what she does in the world of tabletop role-playing games. I'm talking about painting awesome miniatures, building amazing terrain, and being an incredible game master. So, here is my interview with V. Make sure you go check out all of her awesome stuff and all of the games that she has run. They are really, really incredible. Okay, everybody, now I am here with one of my favorite people in the world, one of the most creative people in our hobby. It is awesome to have you here. V, for people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I am V Muse, and I have the YouTube channel, The Crafting Muse, where I show people how to paint miniatures, make terrain for their tabletop games. I am also a DM over on the Cobalt Twitch channel, or no, Cobalt Press Twitch channel. That's what it's called. And so many orders of operations. Also a player over on I do a lot of stuff. I'm a player on Mini Terrain Domain every Thursday night in the Dawnbringers. And I also am in the PR and marketing department for WizKids, where, all the fun stuff of, hey, take a look at this. That's, that's stuff that I do too.
Yes. Yeah. So you're like in a lot of different facets of this hobby. And so I'm wondering, like, at what point did you make the shift, right, from player to professional? I know it kind of all started with your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, the whole thing about like how I got here was all extremely organic.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like an intentional sitting here, mwahaha, great plan that I had in store and I shall reveal all at the end type of situation. It was totally not the case at all. So I think probably when things started shifting was when I started preparing for D&D in a castle. That's where it went from, oh, this is more like hobby side thing to, no, this is becoming a serious venture where people are seeking me out to do things. So I think getting ready for that castle last year is what prompted the snowball to roll faster, is the way I like to look at it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so how did the YouTube channel start, right? Like, how did crafting begin? Like, I am so craft averse, right? I don't know. I don't know glue from scissors, basically.
Oh dear. Yeah.
So like, how did you decide to get started showing off the crafts you were making for your game on YouTube?
Well, I've always been a crafty person. Shocker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Complete shock. I was even as a little kid making like doll houses and clothes and things like that, much to my mother's consternation, because I take things like, stuff she was hoping to use for other purposes, but commandeering them for my own efforts. So I've always had this I think I was using my first hot glue gun at like 8 years old. Something stupidly young. Now that I look back on it as a mother, I'm like, oh, maybe I should have been playing with that. But, 80s kids were, free range.
Right.
So it was one of those things where I've always been making stuff. So it's by nature that I'm always making something. I can't not be doing something creative. And then when it got into starting to play the game and realizing that tabletop creations, like crafts, were a thing, I started dabbling in that because it reminded me very much of like, oh, this is kind of like when I used to make dollhouses and stuff. And there was a crafting group. I mean, it's still there. It was called DM Scotty's Facebook page type of thing. And I started sharing pictures of what I was making in that group. And people started saying, wow, that's really cool. How did you do that? Never ask a teacher how to do that because the teacher's going to want to teach.
Right.
So that was my hearing, excuse me, could I have the lesson plan for that? So I basically just started sharing step-by-steps, really janky video tutorials of like what I did to create this particular piece. And people kept asking me to do it. So I kept making the videos and it just kept going from there, is really like the whole beginning.
Yeah. And now you have like you've got a studio, right? Like you've got professional lighting in your videos. You've got amazing sound quality. It's really something. I know like the first time I watched one of your videos, they were already at this very professional level. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I still am never going to be able to learn how to do this, but you made it really very easy and sort of broke it down step by step to see how you started with raw materials and then ended up with these just gorgeous set pieces, terrain, how you painted miniatures, right? Like there's all kinds of things on the Crafting Muse channel that from like, wow, this is going to be really amazing and a showstopper to like, here are some basic skills anybody can learn, which I think is really great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that a lot of it comes from having been a teacher. I want to break it down for people to be accessible and feel like they can approach it and not be intimidated by it. Like I'm the one who's always like, if you're a newbie, please come my way because I have no problem helping you learn. I'm very much the knock on the door and I'll throw it wide open like, hi, welcome, come on in, without question.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And it's great because you are so welcoming. Your social media presence is very positive, but not in like a dishonest way, very genuine, very welcoming to new people in the community and stuff like that. So I think you've definitely helped grow the hobby. As you mentioned, you're also a streamer, right? You play in streams, you run a game on stream. How did you get into that? How did you get into like streaming the games that you were playing?
That was actually in connection to crafting because that was something where one of my fellow guild masters, Bill, he's known as Wylock from Wylock's Armory, also on YouTube. Bill decided that he wanted to take a few of us crafters and do a mini campaign. So it was myself and 3 other gentlemen. And it was 5, I want to say it was 5 sessions where we played out this particular campaign that Bill had developed. And after that, it was sort of like I got the bug. I really enjoyed playing online. And people started seeing that and I started getting approached like, hey, would you want to play in this one shot? Hey, do you want to play in this mini campaign? And then it became something where more people were seeking me out to actually play on their games, like long-term campaigns. So that's really how I got into the streaming side of it, was because of the one little quick blip, like, hey, let's just do something fun and out of the ordinary for the crafting circle. And then it sort of had me sort of straddling these 2 different sectors of the tabletop world.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you do a lot of different things. You're even on a show actually right here on the Don't Split the Podcast Network, Dark Fortunes, which is great. But I want to talk about your Kobold Press show first,
sure.
because you run games for Kobold Press. So how did that come about? And tell me about the game you're running.
That came about when Will reached out to me. I think it was like 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave for the castle. So perfect timing. He asked if I'd be interested in either playing or DMing on the Kobold Press channel. And I was upfront when I'm like, look, I have all this stuff going on right now. Time may be an issue. You're looking at this start time. I may not be able to accommodate that start time because I'm in a different country at that time. And he said he'd get back in touch with me. And it was one of those things, like we chatted for about a half hour. And when we were done, I kind of had in my mind, like, it's not going to pan out. I'm not fitting into what they need. And much to my surprise, he got back in contact with me. He goes, oh yeah, so we want you to DM. And I was kind of like, I'm like, oh, okay, that not at all what I was expecting. And at that time, Tales of the Old Margrave was coming out and they wanted to get more eyes on it. So they sent me the materials and I read through it and realized, oh my God, I'm dealing with a magical forest, and Into the Woods is like one of my like I like to watch it. So for me, it was very much like, oh, this is something I could work with, especially because the game I had developed for the castle was also pulled from Kobold materials. Like I was using Creature Codex, Tome of Beasts, Midgard Handbook, and everything like that to get some of these concepts going for BB's Place, which is more of a one-shot setup that kind of has an enduring quality to it. So when I realized there were a lot of parallels between what I had already started to develop with the one-shot campaign hybrid is the best way to describe that one, and then what they were looking for in Tales of the Old Margrave, it started turning into what is called the Last Heir. Which was something where I started out with this one concept, like, oh, it can kind of develop around this story. That story got lost after like the second session because of my players, which I'm totally fine with. In fact, I like where we went instead. And it was one of those things where I was looking through and there are modules already built into the book and they're fantastic and they're lovely. But what I decided I wanted to do was sort of pick and choose bits from each module and put it together so people get an experience of what is in the book entirely, rather than devote it to just one module and play it through that. Because I knew I had one season. I didn't know if there were going to be more. I didn't know that a second season was going to be offered. So I'm thinking, let's make sure we just hit all the highlights and then take it from there. So the campaign just basically built itself over points that I wanted to hit after reading through the Margrave book and just sort of, bookmarking and taking notes and all that loveliness. And Trello is, oh my gosh, my best friend. So, so after going through and creating things, it also became, a lucky happenstance where I had some fantastic players who did some really wonderful creations with their PCs. Great variety, great interactions with each other, and very diverse in terms of how they each approach problems. And they also like to split the party every single episode. Like, I'm not kidding. So it's like they kind of get all over the place. They get into different things, and each time they present something to me, because I've made a point to get to know the Margrave well enough, we're able to explore it all together. And it's like, okay, so you want to go and do this? Yeah, why not? Let's go and check out and see what happens here. And it's become this wonderfully beautiful creation that we've all built together, quite frankly. And I enjoy seeing what they're doing with it. And if you had told me when I was first developing the concept for The Last Heir, we'd end up here, I'd be like, yeah, sure, not happening. I mean, Mama Rihanna, she's an NPC who was supposed to be thrown away after the first episode. She was just this drunken old lady at the tavern. That's all she was supposed to be. And they locked right onto her. So after that first episode, I'm like, I can't not use her again. So she came back in for a second one, and then for a third one. And then she became just something they would look to. And she's sort of become like their guide, their little bit of drunken voice of reason, if that makes sense. But yeah, so it's a beautiful experience to share with some really talented people, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's great. I love The Last Heir, and I think it's something that everybody should definitely check out. What do you do to prepare for it? What you said about, like, the woods, right? The Margrave so well that helps you then improv with your players. So what does your prep look like, and what did it look like when you first started versus now?
I am very much a beforehand prep heavy DM. I need to create that world. I need it to live, breathe, and exist in my mind for me to feel I can run it effectively. It's one of those things where same thing happened with BB's Place. Like, that place is embedded in my mind. I could do a pickup game in a heartbeat because all those NPCs, they have their lives and their personalities and their stories that still keep going. Even though no one's playing the game, I'm still mulling on that world. So the same thing has happened with the Margrave, where it's like I'm thinking about, okay, well, in their absence, what would this NPC have been doing, and things like that. So it's sort of like I build the lore, the history, the politics, the religions, and everything. It's all sort of whirring in the head, even though I'm not sitting at the table presenting it to them. So when the time comes, because it's a place where it's like, oh, it's like, visiting grandma's house, it well enough where you can explore it still, even though you're not living in it every single day type of situation. So before a game starts up, I will be spending hours upon hours taking notes. Like I said, I use Trello to kind of like divide everything up, and I'll have a list of NPCs, potential names, areas, settings, things that could happen, everything like that. So it's sort of like anticipating everything. And then when the time comes to actually run the game, the first couple sessions, yeah, I'll sit and I'll prep more. But once that groove is hit, that's where it becomes more improvisational for me. That's where I'm more like, let me see what they're doing and feed off of their reactions and work it from there. And just make sure I have like the books and the resources nearby in case I need to pull up a stat block or something like that. Or if need be, it's like, you know what, rule of cool, let's just play with this and see what the dice have to say.
For me, it's difficult when I prepare for a stream, and it's very different than when I prepare for a game at home, because I don't want to be caught wasting time looking things up. You know, the audience isn't going to be very interested in that, right? In me just doing that kind of thing. But I also think when you're blessed with good players, you feel like you have a safety net after a few sessions once you get to know, like, oh, okay, I don't need to be, it's not just my show, right? It's all of us, and we can share in that experience of entertaining the audience together, which is good.
Exactly. I mean, there are times where I have been able to sit back for a half hour and just watch them go.
That's great.
And I'm taking notes, mind you. They don't see me taking the notes, but up here they're getting logged and they're getting filed away. But it's wonderful to watch them just interact with one another and feed off each other, and hearing what they're locking onto and thinking about further. And you're thinking like, well, that's not at all where I was going to go with it, but now that you mention it,
hey. So you've played a lot as a player too, in a bunch of different streams, and now in the Dark Fortunes podcast.
Yeah.
What do you think when you're a player? How do you see your job different from when you are a player at a table without an audience to a table that has an audience watching?
Well, that's a good one. Although really for me, I think it still stays somewhat the same regardless if there's audience or not, because I approach playing as group storytelling. So it's not so much performance as it is pushing the story forward and helping it develop itself and grow. So that stays pretty consistent for me as a player, regardless if a camera is on or not. In terms of when I'm on a stream and I'm a player, well, definitely my role is to make sure that, you know, if I see that the DM needs that time, like you were just talking about, the time to quickly look up something, I will be the one to be like, okay, this is what my PC would do. So let's just start prattling off to someone else and kind of keep things in motion and entertaining while they have to look up something or do something quickly. You know, it's more the team effort factor that goes into that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was one of the things that struck me when I first started watching Critical Role, is that the cast is very, when Matt says like, oh, I need a minute to look something up, they're very good at jumping right in, and to the point where it's almost like, man, I hope this takes Matt a while to look this up, because this is great.
No, just keep going.
Yeah, one of the things that I am very impressed that you can do, and we've talked about this before, kind of off the recording here, but for the audience, you know, I'm very impressed with your ability to create characters, specifically create characters' voices. And I'm also like impressed with your ability to remain in that character doing that voice as that character trying to disguise their voice as someone else, for instance, right? Like you can tell it's one character doing another character, which is an extremely hard thing to do. If anybody has ever tried to do that, it's just really hard to, you know, do the duck season, rabbit season kind of thing. So how do you have any sort of like training as an actor? How did you get your ear and your skills?
It's funny you should ask if I haven't been formally trained, but I do have a lot of actors in my family. My cousin actually is a voice actor. We all have a mimic's ear. Very much we're able to hear sounds and mimic them. You know, we're able to recreate the voice, recreate that, you know, the onomatopoeia factor of things. So it's something where I think that comes partly into play. The other thing is when I was younger, moved around a couple times. And when I moved from Texas to Jersey, I was told I talk funny. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Why you say not talk funny? So I had to, at a young age, learn how to manipulate my voice quickly so that I would sound more, you know, air quotes, normal. to others around me.
Sure. New Jersey is normal, right? Yeah, definitely.
Of course, that's a funny thing. It's like I can affect the Jersey accent if I need to and terrify people when I do, which is fun. But for me, it was more watching television, watching different characters, listening to how they would speak and taking on that more of an affectation of an accent or a voice. So I think because I did that at an early age, I got familiar with how to pick up sounding like people or someone in particular, because I mean, you hear me talk all the time, just in general. I will flip through voices like 1, 2, 3, and I don't even realize I'm doing it half the time, which can be interesting. So I think that's honestly how I started getting into it. And then I got really into musical theater in high school. So again, that very much fleshed out even further my love for becoming different characters and playing different roles. And then also was in a vocal group. So I had the musicality of it and the musical training and intonations and cadence and everything like that got absorbed. And then when I became focused in becoming an English teacher, you know, there are times where you're trying to keep students' attentions and you still have students who may not like reading. So guess what? When you sit and you read the story to them and you have your voice for, you know, okay, George, and then you have, you know, Lenny and everything going on, and it helps them engage. It helps them want to find out what happens and keep going with the story. So I started doing, you know, reading in different voices and everything like that. And it was all just sort of this thing. It kept building and building and building. So yeah, there's not any formal training, but there have been circumstances that have led to exploring it more for sure throughout my whole entire life.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And it seems, frankly, unfair that you can do that and also craft amazing things and run a great game and be an amazing player. And so it's not fair. Hand out some of that talent to other people, please.
Okay.
Other things that I wanted to ask you about was the work you're doing right now with WizKids is really very fun and cool. And I know it's something that is relatively new at the time of the recording of this. How did all of that come about, and what are you doing with them?
Again, this is one of those things where it's just right place, right time. I every so often I'll make a point of sort of just like sweeping around and keeping an eye out for job postings. And I'll make a point to either share them on my Facebook page for the Crafting Muse, or I'll retweet things like that, just because I know that there are people who are always out there looking for a job and they never, you never know what they may have come across or they haven't come across. So it was one of those things. I was looking on WizKids career posting because I was actually on their website for something else entirely different. I was looking for a particular mini, needed a SKU so I can get in contact with my contact there, be like, hey, could I get this mini? Total fluke. So I'm like, let me just check out careers. And when I was looking in their career section, they had a posting for PR and marketing. And I was reading through, the listing of what it was they were looking for. I'm like, heck, I do this for my channel. No, why not? It was literally let's see what happens. Polished up the old resume, sent it along. And the next day I was talking with them and things just kind of came about from that. And yeah, now I'm working with them in the PR and marketing department. And it's, reaching out to other influencers, seeing if they want to help spread the word about products that we have coming out, or, getting campaigns going and ready for launch and social media. And like, it really does run alongside of what I was already doing for the channel. And I've even made a few videos for them now, because with all the loveliness that has happened in this world and the whole, everyone having to be, cooped up at home, it happened about the time we have started doing these things that were called paint and takes, where you'd go to your FLGS and be able to paint a miniature at your game store and then bring it home with you. Well, that can't happen right now. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward. So we flipped it to take and paint, with the concept that if you could contact your local game store, see if they're offering shipping to home, curbside pickup, something like that. Like basically trying to encourage people, please keep going to your game store. Make sure they're okay. Find a means to keep supporting them, even though you're not allowed to like hang out there or things like that right now. So with that idea, we wanted to make sure that we had enough things going in terms of, all right, game store owners, you can run a stream for your customers using these videos you could download and then do your own private stream to these people and get things going and do your own painting sessions still. You don't have to have people come into your store though. So I've made a few videos for them for that as well. So there's a lot of crossover and utilizing what I was already doing for the channel and what I'd been doing for my own social media presence. And it's really been, it's exciting. It's, you're up and running the whole day, which for me is not a bad thing considering I don't sit still for very long.
Right.
And things like that. So yeah, it's honestly, it's very cool, and getting to connect with some great people and venture into some new projects that I'm very excited about.
Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Hero Forge. Hero Forge offers fully customizable tabletop miniatures with dozens of fantasy races and thousands of parts to choose from. Their easy-to-use design tool lets you build the perfect miniature online using a fully 3D in-depth character creator right in your web browser. Hero Forge offers custom minis in a variety of materials, including plastic and metal options. Hero Forge also offers downloadable model files for users with 3D printers to print their own unique designs right at home. Hero Forge is constantly expanding the catalog of customization options. They're adding new parts every single week and major features like new races or custom posing on a regular basis. Visit HeroForge.com to start designing your custom miniature today and check back often because new content is added all the time. Tell them DSPN sent you. Let's get back to the babble. Now, I know we haven't talked about game design. That's not one of the things that you've mentioned that you do yet. But you did bring up BB's Place. And so before we get to questions from from Twitter, which we've got some that I am eager to ask you, I have a question, which is, you talk about BB's Place a lot. I've heard a lot about it. People have fun when they play. Is that something that you've ever considered publishing in some respect?
Well, yeah, kind of, sort of, yes. I really would honestly love to. It just, it's one of those things, like you said, I don't have the full scale knowledge of how to get it all laid out to be published ready. That's not in my skill set. I can very much come up with story and tell you about this concept that I have and everything like that, but it's something where I'm definitely going to need to get someone to help me fine tune and polish it and get it ready to be like, here you go, here's something you could do, and share it with the public, because it's one of those games where everyone who has played it, I think their their PC has become an NPC. Like, they want to stay behind. Like, oh, can my so and so have a job here? And it's sort of like the island of misfit toys in the best of ways, quite frankly. So yeah, if I could have the chance to get BBs up and running and out there, oh yeah, I totally would do that. But saying this, I'm also looking at my own personal schedule right now, and I'm like, oh, that's a back burner idea.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, totally love any chance to run it and just, get people laughing and enjoying it, because it's basically, magical speakeasy is the best way to sum it up. And it just gets to be insanely funny with what people do with their characters and with the NPCs, because they're all so quirky and different and fun to interact with.
That's great. That's excellent. Well, if only you knew some game designers who could help you out.
Who on earth could I ask? I don't know a single one ever.
So luckily you're spoiled for choice. But if you ever need help, right? Honestly, I would love to work with you on it. So
I won't say no to that.
So let's head to Twitter. We've got some great questions from people. So the first one comes from at Goblin Katie.
Oh, know her. Nope.
No, don't know her. Don't know her. Is the worst. Goblin Katie wants to know if you could say something to all the young geek girls out there, what would it be?
Hang in there. It's not easy being the geeky girl. I will say that. It's one of those things where you definitely, you are the outsider sometimes when you have the quote unquote mean girls who are like, oh, what are you doing reading the book? Like, oh my God. But it's those first few years might be a little bit more, not a battle. That's not the word I want to use. It might be a little bit more of a trial. You're going to have to prove yourself a little bit more, but it is worth it in the end to keep pushing forward and to keep at it, quite frankly. Because once you get to the other side, it's an amazing world to be a part of. Absolutely.
That's great. Katie has a second question here that I think
Of
is really
course.
good, which is, and this one is deep. It is, what do you see as the biggest hurdle facing the tabletop role playing game community right now?
The otherness. This how to phrase this. And again, this is coming as a teacher. It's interesting to see how, even though, yes, we're absolutely a community, and you see it happen when, things come up, people rally very quickly to help each other without question, which is a beautiful thing to see when someone is in need and others are quick to step up and put out a hand. That is, wonderful. That is unique, I think, to our community, quite frankly. I don't see that happen very often in other places where it's within a heartbeat. People are like, how can I help you? Let me help you. What can I do? Which is a wonderful side of the tabletop community. But there is this factor of these other people, these other games that I think sometimes worm their way into the mentality of how people interact with each other. And they forget that, yes, there is this other factor, but you're still speaking with another human being who has feelings, who has emotions, who has their own thoughts. I think the whole anonymity kind of rears its ugly head every so often when it's through the internet, especially, where it's a lot easier for people to start flinging things out and blah, rah, 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 rah. It's like, no, time out. Just take a breath, please, before jumping down someone else's throat. Maybe, just maybe, listen to what they are trying to say. Don't anticipate what your response needs to be. So I think that's probably our biggest thing to still work through. Yes, we're very much making progress in terms of being more accepting and working with each other, but I think there's still this one's better than the other one, and that hullabaloo that can still sort of work its way into things.
We also have a question from Topher Kohan, who wants to know, what's the best tip you have for people who want to get into RPG crafting?
Oh, okay. If you want to get into crafting, definitely just start going on to YouTube channels and start watching different videos. Don't lock on to one person's channel. That's key. The thing I have found with crafting is everyone has their own approach and comfort levels. So if you jump onto someone's channel where, say, they're using things like utility knife and hot glue and a Proxon cutter and things like that, you may start feeling a little overwhelmed because those are products, first of all, you're going to have to buy, and you may not be familiar with how they work. You could jump onto another channel where it's literally just someone taking watered down school glue, the white PVA glue, and then adding it to toilet paper, saying let it dry overnight and paint it, and suddenly you have a rock. So for those just starting out, literally just get onto YouTube and just make a point to sort of cycle through and type in tabletop crafting. And that's going to pull up a slew of different channels for you. You could also go to Tabletop Crafters Guild, and it'll probably give you the tabletop crafters. It's always such a tongue twister for me. It is long. The Tabletop Crafter Guild Masters first. Yeah, that's the word. So it's a great resource, and plus you get the visuals as well as the audio factor. And if you put on closed captioning, then you also get the instructions too. So it's a good resource for different methods of learning and connecting with how things work and how things function, for sure.
Oh, wow. That's great. At Gorham Wolf wants to know, what's next for you as far as your crafting work or your streams?
Whew, that's a big question, actually. I am still crafting. I am still painting, obviously, considering who I'm working for now. So that is stuff that is still going to keep happening. The channel itself is slowing down simply because by nature of time. I am trying to keep up with maybe doing a stream once or twice a month, just to sort of connect and say, hey, how you doing? This is what I've been up to over the past month. It's amazing how quickly time is flying now. So I do intend to keep doing my live streams. In terms of instructional videos, I've gone back and I've looked at what I have on video on demand, and it's actually a pretty strong library on its own. There's a lot in there where people can go in and learn a bunch of different techniques. So for me, it's almost like there's no need to really reinvent the wheel and keep sharing something perpetually just because I feel this need, like, oh, I have to keep the channel surviving, when really for me, the channel is something, it's sustaining itself. It's doing fine and it still gets subscribers and I still interact with people from it, which is fantastic. But that's always been more my, not hobby. Like it's more than a hobby, but it's not my job, if that makes sense. So it's something that can still perpetuate and still I can use to jump in every so often to reconnect, everything like that. But there are things like once conventions kick back into gear, yes, I absolutely intend to do more painting classes and things like that and connect with people face to face because I find that is a hugely invaluable thing to be able to do with each other. Like, hey, I watch your videos. Cool. It's great to meet you. Great job painting that mini. Like it's that little bit that is wonderful to have as well. In terms of the streaming, as far as I know, that's going to keep going until I can't do it anymore, quite frankly, because I enjoy the gameplay. I enjoy exploring the different characters and, even with different one shots here and there and doing stuff like that. I mean, the fact we have the game we play together on Saturday mornings just to kind of goof around. I mean, Scylla was not supposed to endure for as long as she has, quite frankly.
Yeah, I do think when that game started, there was a question of like, how long will we be able to meet every Saturday morning?
Yes.
And it turns out the answer is for quite a while.
Yeah.
Which is great because it's great to hang out with that entire group. But the circumstances that are bringing us together are not great.
Not the greatest reason. I think it's also just for every single one of us who are involved in that group is we do streams for an audience. So for us, it's great to have a game where we're just fooling around. There's that, I can relax. But no, I definitely, as long as I can, I do want to keep up with the streaming, be it DMing or be it as a player, because I enjoy exploring characters and developing them and seeing how they change and morph and become these creatures of their own. I mean, I would absolutely sit down and have coffee with most of my PCs.
Which ones would you not have coffee with?
I probably wouldn't have coffee with Shadow. He's a jerk. He's a full of himself drow.
So, Aris Savad wants to know, what's your favorite module that you've run so far?
That's a technical question because I haven't technically run a full module. I have not done that. I tend to, like I said with the Margrave, I'll pick and choose elements that I think are super cool and want to work into my own homebrews. Is sort of how.
Do you have one you want to run or that you haven't gotten to, work into homebrew stuff yet that you want to work into your homebrew?
Honestly, like once I get time to read through Theros, there's probably a couple in there that I'm going to lock onto because Greek mythology, that was my jam for the longest time. But in terms of something I could rattle off right now, no, which is not to say I don't read them and I don't enjoy playing modules or anything like that. I think they're fantastic and they're wonderful. It's just my brain works more in the riffing concept than the running something in a linear formation for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think, there's all kinds of adventures and people are always tweaking and improving the format and trying bold things and that sort of thing. So, and one of the things that I love about Kobold Press is that Kobold puts out a lot of books that are about working into your campaign, right? Like working elements of Midgard into your campaign or working elements of the Southlands or whatever it might be, right? Tales from the Old Margrave is great because it's got all these modules, but it's also just got this
stuff,
magic forest.
Oh my God, which is its own creature in and of itself too. And I love the fact that it's like, you can behind the scenes of the DM, there are certain things that come into play that the players are like, wait, why is this happening to me? It's like, well, you pissed off the forest. That would be why.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's great. It's really, really a very well put together thing. I made just a couple, like a handful of monsters for it. But the work that was done on that book is really
beautiful. It is even the wording is gorgeous to it. There was actually a passage that is really what started the concept for The Last Heir. And it was 2 paragraphs, literally 2 paragraphs in the Eastern Heart section about its lore and about how Baba Yaga is out to keep it in its broken apart self so that she doesn't lose her power to someone new coming into it. And it was talking about how the heart was broken into shards, and the shards were distributed into different creatures of the Margrave. So it's her focus to try and keep these creatures alive for as long as possible, whereas you have Blackteeth, sort of her nemesis, out there trying to destroy them and put the heart back together so that he can, take over the Margrave, if you will. And the thing that stuck with me, I'm like, okay, this is poignantly beautiful. You have a heart that is broken into shards but can still be put back together somehow. I just thought that was a beautiful concept. So it's a beautiful, beautiful resource. It really is. The artwork, the writing, everything about it. I mean, I will totally be knocking at doors and selling it if I could.
Yeah, it's great. It really is. So, have you perchance used the Lunar Kidna yet?
But I was looking at that one.
All right, yeah, I'm just saying.
Hey.
Cool.
No, it's because I was literally just looking at that one last week. I was like, I need to think about a way to work this one in, because it's really cool looking. And I just kind of sat there. I'm like, oh, not yet, but sometime.
Yeah, the art was just incredible for that one. So they really did an amazing job.
They really did.
Yeah. So Blake Ryan Batman wants to know if are there any non-fantasy things that inspire your creations, either crafts or what you do as a dungeon master?
Very much so. Nature. I love National Geographic. Was one of those magazines I always had. Always. And flipping right to those photos of nature and animals and things like that were what I would lock onto and just, stare at and just study. And I very much, when I go to craft something or to paint something, I always go to an actual reference photo of something in real life before applying it to the miniature or applying it to the build. Like I've done rainbow sandstone, and I have looked at photos of rainbow sandstone and studied how to recreate that look on a piece of very small terrain. I have, looked at different bugs and applied them to different miniatures. And Umber Hulk, that's cool and all. Let's make it look like a scarab beetle. And I turned one into a, this blue and purple iridescent scarab Hulk, I guess is what you would call it.
Wow.
Yeah. So very much reality and fantasy get blended together with the way my crazy mind works. Cause I love to pull that touch of reality and pull it into the fantasy. Cause I find by doing that, it makes it all the more immersive for the players when I'm running a session, or for the people working with the miniature, whether it's a monster or something like that. It makes it more identifiable for how to approach it and recreate a certain look to it.
That's great. That's really very, very cool. And it's great always to hear National Geographic shout it out, because that's a place where I used to work, right? So like I get to,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I used to. I mean, I did not do anything with the magazine. I worked with the television channel. So
I enjoyed that too.
But it's great to see, especially when artists are getting inspiration from the real world, just kind of the details that you can see on different things, right? I've been rewriting the monster manual with my father.
I love it.
And it's been interesting to see, right? And he's older and has, like many older people, has some sort of vision issues. And so sometimes there are things that he doesn't notice or doesn't pick up on that I think like, oh, is this because this isn't in the art, right? Like we know a creature is scaled because the monster manual tells us, but when you look at its art, it might just be a solid color. Like there's no actual scales there, or sometimes there are, right? And so I love to think about all of sort of the real world things that we see artists bringing to the table and then mixing with fantasy, like you said, is just we get these really incredible creations.
Yeah. I mean, I especially when it comes time to paint monster minis, I will go and I read up their lore and I'll look into their layers, like where do they live? And that gets me thinking like, okay, well, they live in this type of environment, which means their skin might be kind of clammy. So maybe it might have more of a, a slight glisten to it as opposed to being bone dry. Just little details like that definitely affect how I'll approach painting things and finishing them for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining me, V. We have more questions, but we're out of time. So I think people should probably come ask you their questions directly, in which case, where can they find you?
Best place to find me is on the tweeters because I'm very active on Twitter, and that's at the Crafting Muse. Very hard, I know. You can also find me on my YouTube channel. Again, the Crafting Muse. And guess what I'm going to say for Facebook? The Crafting Muse. Instagram. I do have a Twitch channel, but that's more there because I use it for hosting all the other lovely channels that I play on. It's not really an active channel in and of itself. But you can see me in the chats sometimes. So shout out and say hello to me there. But yeah, no, just drop me an @ and I'll do my best to get back to you. And if I don't get back to you, it just means I got busy that day, and chances are I read the notification and someone said boo.
Exactly. Well, yes, definitely follow V everywhere. Remember that the in front of the Crafting Muse, right? It's very important. You're not just some random Crafting Muse.
No, I'm the Crafting Muse. Sometimes even called the Muse now, which is really weird. Like, oh, that me.
There you go. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Apple. I really appreciate it.
I had fun. Thanks for inviting me.
That was a great interview with V. You know, people, Tabletop Babble is going to move on beyond episode 200, but I will not as its host. Episode 200 will be my last episode. It's moving over to the Geekspective Network, where Amber, Kenny, and John are going to take great care of the show. They have some amazing ideas, and I cannot wait to become a listener of this amazing podcast. So I encourage you to give them a great start with me. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review, help other people find the show, help them get a great podcast. It is going to be really amazing. You should be so excited for this. All right, people, you can find me online at worldbuilderblog.com, burnbright.com, and over at twitter.com/JamesIntricasso. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. This episode was edited by Nate Pausenga. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding DSPN with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. And don't forget, play lots and lots of RPGs. Hey people, before we go, I just wanted to remind you about Burn Bright, BRYTE, burnbright.com. Go check it out for amazing science fantasy adventures on Roll20. I was one of the lead designers. I worked with an amazing team, and we put together a great game that I really believe in for you. So head on over, burnbright, BRYTE.com to check it out.